Now, despite U-turning on his plan to overhaul the ministerial conduct system, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, will face an outraged House of Commons today as they hold an emergency debate over the corruption scandal engulfing the government.
Labour leader Keir Starmer has called on the Prime Minister to answer, apologise and act after a succession of Tory MPs sought to excuse the Prime Minister's attempts at what is corrupting British politics.
Wes Streeting is Labour's Shadow Child Poverty Secretary, and he joins us now from Westminster. If Boris Johnson is to apologise and act, what do you want to hear from him? What do you want him to do?
Well, for a start, Boris Johnson needs to understand why people are so angry. You can't have a situation where one of his own MPs is paid £100,000 a year to lobby for a private company. I mean, that's been banned in the House of Commons for centuries. And yet, you know, Boris Johnson's reaction to it wasn't to discipline his MPs or to back the Standards Commissioner and the recommendations, but to try and scrap the entire disciplinary process in the House of Commons. I mean, it's just outrageous. It really is. And let's remember that there are significant amounts of public money at the Prime Minister's disposal, at the disposal of his ministers. In fact, in the case of this company that Owen Paterson was lobbying for, they've had hundreds of millions of pounds worth of taxpayers' money. So in terms of action, I think we need an inquiry about how that contract was awarded, because it seems there was no tender process, no competition. So I think we need to know that it was above board and that taxpayers' money was well spent. He needs to call off the attack dogs who've been sent out to attack the House of Commons Standards Commissioner and make it clear that the Standards Commissioner will have the full backing of the government to pursue MPs without fear or favour, to make sure we're upholding basic standards of decency in public life. And it's about time Boris Johnson himself apologised, because at the end of the day, the fish rots from the head. And these kinds of grubby standards are the standards set by Boris Johnson in number 10, and it's just not acceptable.
A lot of people would say, hang on a minute, it's a bit rich for Labour to be having to go at the Conservatives on anything to do with sleaze or bringing the House of Commons into disrepute. One thinks of Fiona Anasanya. There are some names that you can bring up of former Labour MPs who've got themselves into trouble. It's a plague on all your houses, this, isn't it?
No, the important thing is how we act, how we respond when MPs are found to be wrongdoing. We've got a case in point right now. Claudia Webb, who was elected as a Labour MP at the last election, has been found guilty of a very serious criminal offence. The moment the charges were brought, the Labour Party suspended her. The moment the prosecution succeeded, and she was successfully tried, she was expelled from the Labour Party, and we're making it clear that she should resign from the House of Commons. If she doesn't do the right thing, we'd support a recall petition. We'll go door to door in Leicester to get her voters to recall her, because we don't think people like that should be in Parliament. So we've all got a responsibility to uphold standards here, whether it's our party or not. And I think you look at the contrast in leadership. You know, Keir Starmer taking one of his own MPs to task when she's found to be wrongdoing, Boris Johnson trying to scrap the whole system that holds us to account. Keir Starmer, someone who actually put MP expenses cheap behind bars when he was Director of Public Prosecution. Boris Johnson seems to turn a blind eye to wrongdoing in his government. And look, that's the choice facing the country now about the kind of leadership you want in number 10. And I don't think Boris Johnson is upholding the basic standards in public life that all of us are meant to adhere to.
I think there is a genuine need to reform the standard system, particularly over how MPs are disciplined?
Well, we've got a pretty robust system in place, but people need to accept it and get behind it. And what people forget in the Owen Paterson debacle was that the independent commissioner looked at all of the evidence, took evidence, including Owen Paterson's own defence, and then it went to a cross-party committee of the House of Commons, which also includes, you know, ordinary members of the public, not members of Parliament on there too. They unanimously upheld that Standards Commissioner recommendation. They unanimously found him guilty of wrongdoing. They unanimously agreed he should be suspended for 30 days. And what really worries me is not just that Boris Johnson didn't accept the report and tried to scrap the whole standard system. What really worries me is how many Conservative MPs were prepared to go along with him, including, I have to say, a lot of colleagues who I've had genuine respect for across the party divide. And I think they've got to have a serious look at themselves in the mirror as well, because we as MPs it's up to us to hold the government to account. It's up to us to uphold the rules, to uphold basic standards of decency in public life. And the moment you lose sight of that and just troop through a voting lobby because you've been told to, or, you know, you start going along with these kind of sleazy scandals because it happens to be one of your mates, the whole system falls apart. And our country is respected around the world for the kind of standards we uphold in public life. We don't want to go down the road of other countries where sleaze and corruption is just kind of par for the course. And that's why you're seeing the level of anger that we have seen right across the party political spectrum, because I think lots of MPs understand the huge damage, not just that Owen Paterson's done to the reputation of politics, but the Prime Minister has in the way that he responded to it, and the fact that so many of his own Conservative MPs were prepared to walk along with him, dragging themselves into an absolute cesspit of standards which I don't think any MP should find themselves defending, to be honest.
Wes, you'll be aware of the argument more than anyone else, but whilst you're on a salary of some £80,000, the argument is no MPs should have a second job. That one job should be enough. So let's pay them a bit more, and then if you guarantee that they're not allowed to have consultancies or any other paid work, that you stop this immediately.
Look, as you say, we get paid more than £80,000 a year, and we work in this palace behind me. I don't think your viewers will be shedding any tears about how hard up MPs are, and frankly, I don't think the level of our salary is an excuse for people moonlighting in the way that Owen Paterson has. Now, of course, there are some exceptions. There are some people who need to continue professional practice in order to keep their licence to practice. You know, my colleague Rosanna Allen-Khan, who works in A&E, is a really good example of that. We wouldn't want to ban that, but the idea you should be lobbying and have paid consultancy whilst being an MP, I mean, bluntly, I don't know how people find the time, to be honest. I mean, my job as a constituency MP is a more than full-time job. And like most MPs, I mean, I tend to work 6 days a week, sometimes 7, you know, and we do it because we love it. We don't need to be paid more. We just need to follow the rules and uphold basic standards. And we shouldn't need a rule book to tell us how to behave. And we shouldn't need a rule book to tell us that you can't go around earning hundreds of thousands of pounds lobbying for a private company. It just stinks. And so does Boris Johnson's reaction to it.
What do you think the outcome will be today?
Oh, do you know, I'd like to think that Boris Johnson's going to turn up this afternoon, take it on the chin, accept he's done something wrong, apologise to the House of Commons and apologise to the country for the kind of, you know, way he presides over his government. But I think we're more likely to see pigs flying over this place this afternoon than for that to happen. You know, when it comes to doing the right thing, you rarely find Boris Johnson, you know, on the scene. So we'll see. I mean, we expect Boris Johnson to come to the House of Commons to apologise and to put in place the robust standards that we expect from ministers in the government. But I won't hold my breath on that, and I think people should judge him very harshly for that.
One Labour frontbencher suggested the Prime Minister should resign. Would you like to see that?
I'd love Boris Johnson to resign. I'd like to see the whole Tory party out of government. Of course I would. But as I say, I barely think we're going to get an apology out of the guy. And I think it reflects really badly on him. I really do. I just think that when you're the Prime Minister, you've got to hold your ministers to the highest standards. And when someone in your party is found guilty of wrongdoing, it doesn't matter whether they're, you know, your oldest, closest friend, you've got a responsibility to your office and to your country. And that's what Boris Johnson has failed to remember. And as he does so often, I mean, I just think people increasingly see with Boris Johnson, he's someone who says one thing and does another. You know, I just think people need to ask some serious questions about the judgment of the man who currently sits in number 10 and his fitness to govern.
Whereas if you look at the sky now, any pigs?
I don't think so. We'll see. Boris Johnson, if you're watching, prove me wrong. I would love for you to do the right thing. This is above party politics, actually. This comes right to the heart of basic decency in politics, and we shouldn't be complacent about the level of trust in politics. You know, there's a lot of cynicism out there. When I knock on doors in my own constituency, I go campaigning around the country. You know, the way that people feel about politics often doesn't reflect the kind of integrity I see on display from people I work with every day, not just within my own party, but within other parties too. And, you know, I think with this whole scandal, I think Boris Johnson's really let the side down and reinforces that idea that somehow politicians are just in it for themselves. And it breaks my heart, because I think most people I work with in the House of Commons go into it for the right reasons, whatever party they're in. But scandals like this do us no favours, and that's why we are all taking it so seriously, and why we're going to have, I think, a very robust debate in the House of Commons today that the Prime Minister ought to attend, ought to show up to, ought to take responsibility for, and ought to apologise for.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.